All right, we're going to quickly talk about Lewis structures and resonance in this video lesson. Now, we've come across situations where a coordinate covalent bond forms, and that's the case in SO2. So if we look and we go through the process of drawing a Lewis structure for SO2, we find that in order to get the 18 electrons, we find that in order to make the sulfur happy, we have to share those 2 electrons shown in pink. So this results in a double bond. With this double bond, you could draw the double bond between the sulfur and either oxygen, just like we see down here. So we often get asked, does it matter where the double bond goes? And the answer is no, because actually what happens is the electrons being shared are in a resonance. And so this double arrow between the 2 different structures for the sulfur is indicating that this is a resonance structure. They differ in location of the electrons, but the electron pair that makes up this double bond is delocalized, or it actually gets shared between both oxygen atoms. And what we end up with is something called an intermediate bond. It's in between a single and a double bond. So it's kind of like a 1.5 bond. Sometimes the electrons spend time between these 2, the oxygen on the left and the sulfur. And sometimes the electrons spend time between the oxygen on the right and the sulfur atom. So because these electrons are sometimes in either location, what we do is we draw a dashed line to indicate that the electron pair is there sometimes. So that's a really easy example of a resonance structure when it's just resonating or being shared between 2 different atoms. Another example is when we have NO3 negative. And if we draw a Lewis structure of NO3 negative, we find that we have 1 double bond, and it can be on either in between the nitrogen and either of the 3 oxygens. And so again, we end up with an intermediate bond, and we show that the electrons are sometimes in either of the 3 locations, and so we draw it with these dashed lines here. So when we have a double bond like this, instead of drawing it out like we had previously in grade 11, we actually draw it as a resonance structure. Okay, and that's it. That's all it is. It's just understanding that they're not actually tied to one specific place, but instead, because we know that the electrons are moving around so quickly, they're actually, the double bond moves around, and so the electrons are sometimes in any of those possible locations, and so we draw it as a dashed line to indicate that it's there sometimes.